Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel. I'm so glad you've joined me this evening, and I have got the most phenomenal story for you tonight, coming from Chloe from Portland, who shares with us an extraordinary supernatural experience she had with a Bigfoot in Mount Shasta. Now, we do know that Mount Shasta is definitely steeped in the supernatural. It's an area of incredible mysterious happenings that have been unexplained. People have had incredible encounters in Mount Shasta, and paranormal investigators tend to say that you're likely to have an experience there if you're not expecting it and if you're alone. Anyway, she gives us an incredible account of what happened to us that gives us another look or another perspective of Bigfoot encounters, and I think you're going to find it incredibly interesting. But before we get started, I just want to thank all my subscribers in North America and around the world for your continued support. And I love you guys so very much. You are very special to me. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do so, because I want to tell you so many secrets are coming out of the woodwork. People who've been sitting on their Bigfoot secrets for many long years, afraid to share them, are finally coming out and revealing the most incredible stories. And I don't want you to miss out on those stories. They're so grateful to have this anonymous forum to express those stories in, because they don't want us to be able to identify who they are. Remaining anonymous is so important to them, which I truly understand, given the reaction that Bigfoot encounters can have on an unbelieving public. So let's get started. I know you're going to love the story. Dear Sarah, my name is Chloe and I'm from Portland. My Bigfoot experience happened to me in 2015 when I visited Mount Shasta with my best friend Judy. Judy has always been fascinated by the supernatural, which was something that I never believed in myself. Some of the stories she would tell me about, with strange things and strange happenings that occurred to people, I found both entertaining and interesting, but never for a moment did I ever believe those stories. I would not describe myself as a hardened cynic, because I rarely wanted to believe her stories, but it was such a struggle for me to overcome my inevitable doubts. Before I tell you my story, I would like your listeners to learn about Mount Shasta in the first place, because it is of great significance to my story and the strange phenomena that occurred on the mountain to me personally that I can only describe as utterly supernatural. Mount Shasta is a premier landmark in Northern Carolina and Southern Oregon. It is the second largest mountain in the Cascade Range behind Mount Rainier, and it stands at 14,179 feet. Its glorious volcanic eruptions are what initiated the creation of those awesome snow-capped mountains that can be visibly seen and that Mount Shasta is so revered for. Even though it's a volcano, it lies dormant and has remained like an unexploded firework for a very long time. But it still has the potential to erupt again. Shasta has a beautiful rugged outcrop, shimmering silvery lakes, mountain streams, dramatic waterfalls, glaciers, scenic vistas and cabins in varying sizes. However, what sets Mount Shasta apart from any other mountain range in the whole wide world is that it is steeped and cloaked in intriguing mysteries and stories of the supernatural, with extraordinary excitings from ascended masters to Bigfoot himself. Its ominous aura holds a plethora of deep, dark secrets that may never be uncovered or ever explained. According to legend, it is the home of spirits, gods, fairies, Bigfoot, cryptid creatures, strange orbs, UFOs, Lemurians, occultists, secret underground bases, and mysterious tunnels. You may be wondering why Judy and I went to Mount Shasta in the first place, and that's a very good question. It was because Judy was on her spiritual odyssey. Well, that's how she describes it at the time. This friend of mine was very unusual in everything. Everything about her was so different, from her bohemian clothes to her carefree attitude about life. She wanted to go to Mount Shasta to have an encounter with an ascended master that she called Saint Germain, who she was hoping would appear to her and reveal some secrets to her from within the mountain. She told me that there were cases of people who were spiritually advanced who had indeed encountered Saint Germain on the mountain during a meditation. She wanted me to accompany her on the trip, which was amusing to say the least, because much as I loved Judy, I did not believe in all her crazy ideas about the supernatural. However, I decided I would accompany her on the trip because I enjoy her company, and I knew that a little hiking up the mountain, some lovely fresh mountain air, and some beautiful scenery would do me no end of good. So that's what I did. We decided to book a 10-day trip at a bed and breakfast in the area. We would have fun exploring the mountain, visiting the lake, and visiting the town of Mount Shasta, and doing a little souvenir shopping there, and buying some interesting curios. It was going to be heaps of fun for us, and the idea of it all made me extremely excited. Fast forward to our drive on Interstate 5 North, very near Mount Shasta. Driving along this interstate was truly a sight to behold, because the views of Mount Shasta were breathtakingly beautiful, with ubiquitous trees and blue sky. I was in the driving seat of my red Jeep, really enjoying the scenic drive, when quite suddenly I nearly ran over this young woman in the road. "Stop!" screamed Chloe. "Stop, for goodness sake!" I slammed down the brakes as hard as I could, wondering all the while why on earth this young girl was standing in the middle of the road. I slid down my car window and called out to the girl, asking if she was all right, as I watched her limping across the road. The girl looked flustered. "You nearly ran me over," she scolded. I knew I could not argue with that, but what on earth had she been doing in the middle of the road? I thought privately to myself. I was too polite to challenge her, but I offered her a lift and she was pleased to accept my offer. I watched her slide into the back seat. I would say she was about 18 and she had very wild blonde hair that was full of those spirally curls that are typical of those spiral perms that come from the 80s era. She was wearing very light Levi jeans with pink leg warmers, white sneakers, and a pink pleated blouse with large shoulder pads. I thought she looked quite smart as I watched her climb into the back seat, secretly wondering why she was wandering on the interstate all on her own. "Are you from around here?" I asked her. "Goodness no," she said. "I'm from Alabama. I'm out here to enjoy Mount Shasta." I agreed with her that Mount Shasta was exceedingly beautiful. I sensed she was very guarded, so I decided not to ask her too many questions, and I proceeded to raise the volume of my radio in the car, and we started listening to our favourite songs, bobbing up and down in our seats, and singing the songs we knew well. Chloe spontaneously reached for a big bag of crunchy beef-flavoured crisps and turned around to offer the girl some of the snacks, and then she freaked out because the girl had simply vanished, and there was no way she could have got out of the car with child locks in it. So where on earth had she gone? This was my first supernatural experience because I knew we must have encountered a ghost. Chloe believed that maybe she'd been killed in a car accident around the Mount Shasta area in the 80s because of the way she was dressed. I found out later that other people had reported ghostly phenomena in this area that they believed were the apparitions of victims of road crashes. It was hard for the cynic in me to accept what had happened, because we had picked up this girl during the day and she had appeared as real as you and I. The experience was hauntingly unsettling. I also never imagined it was possible to encounter a ghost during the day, because paranormal researchers go after the supernatural phenomenon during the night, do they not? So a daytime sighting was peculiar, but there was no explanation on how this girl got out of a locked car that has child locks on it. It was physically impossible, but supernaturally very possible. We arrived at our bed and breakfast spot, which was a house situated down a long driveway that was tucked away in the woods, surrounded by ubiquitous trees and plenty of rambling foliage. Chloe and I settled into our very large bedroom that was both spacious and airy and clean. There was a big poster on the wall of a humanoid-looking ape with writing under it saying, "Is Bigfoot real?" with a huge question mark after it. "What is Bigfoot?" I asked Chloe curiously. Chloe did not know much about Bigfoot, but she said he was a cryptid creature that some people believed was real. I broached the subject with our very friendly host who runs the bed and breakfast, and he said that they had experienced a lot of Bigfoot activity on the premises, and that the guest had sometimes complained of loud banging noises on the gates, and some of the guests had left out food for the Bigfoots, only to find that the food had been eaten the following morning when they went back to the gifting area. He said if we listened carefully, we might hear whooping sounds during the night. We never got to hear Bigfoot whooping that the host had described, and I began to wonder if he made all the stuff up for the people who are interested in encountering Bigfoot, because Chloe had told me there were TV programs dedicated to searching for these cryptid creatures. After all, I thought, if he said he was having encounters on the premises, people would book his Airbnb all the time in the hope that they themselves would get a sighting of the creature. I expressed my thoughts to Chloe, who believed that the man would never have made something up like that. I wasn't so sure. The following day we dressed up in our hiking gear and proceeded to Bunny Flat, where I parked my jeep to begin the hike. We were not intending to venture far up the mountain slopes, because all Chloe wanted to do was to meditate in the hope of meeting the ascended master, St. Germain, which I thought was crazy, but I was not going to express my feelings on the matter. We walked 1 mile and came to Horse Camp, which is the last stop where you can get a drink of yellowish spring water that is so full of electrolytes. By the way, as far as water goes, this stuff was amazingly refreshing and surprisingly energizing. Maybe it's something to do with the energy around Mount Shasta that possibly energizes the water. This was also the spot for a civilized toilet break and a sneak look at the library there. As we proceeded further towards Mount Helen, that was when Chloe found the perfect spot where she wanted to meditate, and she told me to leave her alone at this point because her meditation needed to be done strictly in private. Otherwise, St. Germain was very unlikely to appear to her. I watched her unroll her pink yoga mat and sit in a yoga stance with her palms facing upwards and her eyes closed tightly as she started humming her various mantras. My word, I thought, she really does take all this yogi stuff seriously. But I knew in my heart she would not see St. Germain, because as far as I was concerned, he didn't exist, but I wasn't going to be telling her that. I was not sure how long she was going to be, and as I was all on my own, I would need to keep myself busy. So I had come armed and prepared with a few snacks and drinks in my backpack, a comfortable picnic blanket, a really good book that I'd been planning to read for a very long time, but I'd always been too distracted to actually get into it. At this point, I would like to mention that despite the fact that I had my doubts about the supernatural, there definitely was a palpable energy about Mount Shasta that I cannot explain and was physically very tangible. I would also like to mention that paranormal investigators have always said that to get a supernatural experience on Mount Shasta, it usually happens when you're not expecting it and also when you're alone, 2 criteria that I clearly met on that day but was oblivious about at the time. It was after about 15 minutes as I was reading my book that I heard this very strange, piercing kind of whistling, and I put my book down wondering if there was another hiker around. What I saw at that moment was not what I was expecting to see at all. A 7-foot-tall, 600-pound, humanoid ape man was standing several yards away from me, but he was close enough for me to see him very, very clearly. I could hardly believe what I was seeing with my eyes, because it was Bigfoot himself, the creature I'd seen on the poster the previous night. I think the 3 things that caught my eyes about this Bigfoot was his incredibly large torso, his chunky shoulders, and his bullet-shaped head, as well as his humongous feet and very, very long arms. The creature whistled, looked at me, and turned away suddenly. And then he proceeded to get down on all fours like a dog. But then his body suddenly morphed into a wolf, all in front of me. And then again it started to morph once again into a large black panther. As the creature shape-shifted from one animal to another before my very eyes, the one thing that never changed was his Bigfoot feet. So the transformations of the Bigfoot and these other creatures was very comical. Try and imagine a Bigfoot's foot on a wolf followed by a Bigfoot's foot on a black panther. Well, that's exactly what I saw. I watched the creature rise again and shapeshift into his original Bigfoot form and dart off. While he did this, the creature turned around one last time and looked at me through his seemingly friendly brown eyes. At that precise moment, an audible voice in my head literally said these 3 words that I will never forget as long as I live. The words I heard were, "More things are real than you know." I watched the creature glide off on his long legs with the agility and speed of a cheetah. I stood there for a moment feeling so dazed and shocked by what I had seen, and the words the creature spoke to me telepathically were going over and over in my mind like a washing machine in full cycle. Did this creature know that I did not believe in him or any of this supernatural stuff? Was this why the creature challenged my skepticism and handed me a plateful of supernatural vegetables to digest? That is clearly what happened, and it seemed like the creature had a sense of humour too. I could hardly wait to see Chloe, who seemed to be taking her time with all her meditation. I wanted to tell her about my mysterious encounter with the hairy man, but when I saw her downcast face coming towards me, I decided to hold back my exciting revelations. It seemed like Saint Germain had not appeared to Chloe, as I had anticipated, and she looked utterly devastated. I could see the tears rolling down her face, and she started to sob uncontrollably. You know how long I've been waiting to do this meditation? I've been planning this for so long, and nothing happens, and I think I know why. I knew she was eliciting a response from me, so I dutifully asked her why she thought this was the case. It's because I'm emotionally and spiritually immature, so much so that the likes of someone as enlightened as Saint Germain would never appear to me. It was egotistical and arrogant of me to think that he would. I did not know what to say to that, but I did remind her the ghostly girl we had picked up on the Interstate 5. I reminded her that we had experienced something paranormal, and that finally did lift her mood. The rest of the trip we did a lot of shopping at Mount Shasta. We drank thick chocolate milkshakes and ate plenty of carrot cake in the coffee shop there. We had meals at different locations, and we went for hikes around lakes and watched beautiful golden sunsets, and all in all we had the most fantastic time, and it was a holiday I wouldn't have missed for the world, that I highly recommend to any of your listeners. All this time I was longing to tell Chloe my experience, but I just never had the heart to, because Mount Shasta spiritual retreat was a big deal to her, and I'd only tagged along for the ride. Yet it was I that had had the supernatural experience, and not her. Some might say I saw a skinwalker because of the shape-shifting, but I do believe I saw a Bigfoot because the feet of the Bigfoot never changed once. I believe I had the experience because of my doubting mentality that has clouded my life with skepticism and disbelief for so very long. So if you are like I was once, remember what the Bigfoot told me. More things are real than you know. Oh my word, I am blown away by that story. Thank you so much for sending it. And you know what I've decided to do? I've decided that if this channel does very well and we get enough subscribers and we get to a place that we can start printing some t-shirts to sell, one of those t-shirts is going to say, I can almost see it already in my mind, a pink t-shirt with some black writing saying, "More things that are real than you know," and at the bottom saying, Saroy short stories, Sasquatch encounters, something like that. Don't you think that would be wonderful? Until next time, goodbye and good night.